It's 2035, and advances in AI and data collection have supercharged how we model the future. We're able to predict everything far more accurately, from the weather to economic trends. So, Alan, tell us, does this spell the end of strategic planning as we know it?
Absolutely not. Even if we were able to predict the future, which we can talk through why I think that's not going to happen, so would everyone else be able to. And so strategy would still be as important as ever in terms of thinking, what do we do with that data? How do we react? How might we prepare? How can we build an advantage amidst all of this uncertainty, no matter how good our models get?
That's Alan Eney, BCG partner and director of creativity and scenarios. And I'm Patricia Sabga. Welcome to Imagine This, where we take a trip into the future we hope will challenge the way you think and act today. Over the past couple of decades, companies have learned how to harness their data to get a much clearer picture of where things are headed. And that was even before AI burst onto the scene. Now that it's here, it's already injecting far greater accuracy into predictive models. For example, meteorologists are using AI to know more precisely when hurricanes will form and how strong they'll be. Now, by 2035, there will likely be many new tools to model and predict the future. In some areas, we might come close to, say, 90% accuracy for events that we can only speculate and argue about today. For instance, when the next recession will hit. In this episode, we'll dive into what it will be like to predict the future in the future, how business leaders can use these new tools, and what their limitations will be. Also joining the conversation, Jean, my AI co-host. Welcome, Jean. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey there. Thrilled to be part of this future-gazing episode. The irony of me discussing 2035 never lost on me, considering I'm a product of the future's imagination myself. While AI definitely buffs our predictive power, let's not toss out the human touch just yet. Prediction can be a slippery slope after all, full of unforeseen twists and turns. And Alan, I'm sure you've got a few unpredictable gems up your sleeve when it comes to strategic planning's staying power. Shall we unravel some of those mysteries together?
Why not? The irony's not lost on me either, and I have my own AI if you look at my initials.
A quick note on how we use Jean. Jean is processing and responding to our conversation in real time. We haven't scripted any of Jean's questions or commentary, although we do edit down the entire conversation for length and clarity. So, Alan, you've spent your entire career helping companies develop scenarios and plan for various possibilities. How do you think AI will continue to evolve that process?
There is no doubt that over the last 10 years, 20 years, and probably the next 10, there have been and will be amazing progress in terms of some of these questions. But what that means is we can get better at it. We can get better at predicting the weather. We can get better at predicting climate patterns. We could get better at predicting traffic patterns in cities or energy usage, or even high-frequency trading algorithms to figure out whether the stock market might go up or down in the near term. All of these things we will get better at, but we will never get to the point of prediction. I really cannot stress that enough. We will never get there. Just like if you take a number, now I'm going back to my undergrad degree in mathematics. If you take a number and divide by 2 and divide by 2 again, and you keep cutting it in half over and over and over and over again, it'll keep getting smaller, but you will never get to 0. There will always be something there. There will always be some uncertainty still present in this amazingly complex world we live in.
Okay, so in this future where there's still some uncertainty, but very, very, very little of it, seriously diminished uncertainty, let's take an example, weather forecasting. How will predictive models of the future change the way companies and governments plan for and respond to, say, natural disasters?
We can even think about this today. If you're leaving the house today, trying to decide if you should bring an umbrella or not. Well, you look at the sky. It's blue. I'm not bringing it. It's gray and already raining. I'm bringing it. Fine. But you can do better than that. You take out your phone and check the weather forecast. Oh, but you can do better than that. You can subscribe to some fancy radar weather tracking service that you pay a lot of money for. Okay, so yes, over time, these weather prediction models will absolutely get better. I have confidence in that. I think that when it comes to storm prediction and wildfire prediction and all of these things, we will absolutely get better. But you just have to imagine the complexity of it all. There's this famous butterfly effect, which is about how one small thing happening somewhere can influence so many other things on an ongoing basis. And the level of complexity here is going to go even beyond what the fastest, smartest AI will be able to ponder. It's just too much. And we can get into some particular examples. I mean, even last night, I was watching a baseball game, and there was a beautiful demonstration of what some would call innumeracy, or just basically illiteracy, but with numbers. They said something like, oh, this next batter has a 32% chance of getting an RBI hit right now. And I have full confidence because they praised one of their corporate sponsors who had this beautiful AI that helped them determine this thing. And I think it's fine to say that in all similar situations in the past, this person has gotten an RBI hit 32% of the time. But that doesn't mean it's a 32% chance now. It's a completely different thing because you don't know what the wind is like, and you don't know how loud the crowd is, and you don't know what he had for lunch that's causing his tummy to rumble, and you don't know what the pitcher's thinking about. And there are all of these things that just make it so much more complex than throwing a simple number about past predictions into this. So yes, there are so many implications where we can get better at weather predicting. We can get better at stock market predicting. We can get better at personalized medicine. We can get better at energy usage. We can get better at so many things. But there will always be this massive amount of complexity, even without the innumeracy associated with how we interpret it.
So Jean has a question for you that somewhat addresses this point. Go ahead, Jean.
In this weather forecasting wonderland, Alan, how do we balance our silicon-driven foresight with the art of human judgment? Could over-reliance on tech lead us to forget that even perfect predictions still require prudent decisions?
Absolutely right. Thank you. I think the point I'm making here is that not only is it a question of trying to understand the data as best we can and getting better at the predictions, that's fine. But even if we did have that perfect data that I've been claiming is impossible, it is still subject to our human biases of interpretation. Two people looking at precisely the same facts and data can very easily reach different conclusions, even opposite conclusions. We can get into tons of examples of that. But fundamentally, the point is that even if we had that perfect information, strategy would still be important. We would still have to think about this because if we had the perfect information, it's pretty likely that the competition would too. And so we would still have these questions of thinking about how might we react, how might they react, how might the regulator react, how might others react. All of that remains relevant. It's just that we all have a better starting point in terms of the data than before.
So Alan, what do you think is the best way to use AI in strategic planning? How can it help drive innovation at a company?
I think there are some table stakes ways and then some competitive advantage ways. From a table stakes perspective, there's no doubt that as AI continues to evolve, any organization would want to be at minimum at table stakes and ideally a leader or advantaged in how to use it, how to understand the data, how to understand the models. You don't want to have worse weather forecasts than everyone else or worse consumer preferences forecasts. And so the idea is at minimum you have to get up to speed and be at the cutting edge of where the data and the models are evolving. But again, that's not necessarily a source of advantage. Maybe it can be a little bit. There are some organizations who get a reputation for being the last to close before a storm and the first to reopen, fully stocked with whatever customers might need. And so it can be a source of advantage just on the data, just the kind of signal advantage. But there's more to it than that. And I think AI can be useful in speeding up some of the contingency planning and scenario planning that is also potentially a source of advantage in terms of resilience. When we think about resilience, if I go back to the trivial example, it's a question of, what's the worst thing that happens if I don't bring the umbrella and I do need it? Well, then I guess it depends a little bit how much I care about my hair and my shirt getting wet. What's the worst thing that happens if I do bring it and I don't need it? Well, then there's a 30% chance that I forget it somewhere and I'm out $10 for a new one. Allowing ourselves to contingency plan effectively is a really, really powerful thing that AI can help dramatically with in terms of speeding up the process, laying out the options, pondering the consequences. Not predicting, but preparing.
Jean has a question that falls along these lines again. Go ahead, Jean.
Alan, with AI's role expanding in strategic planning, how do we ensure that diverse perspectives aren't overshadowed by data's echo chamber? Could relying on predictive insights inadvertently streamline creativity out of the decision-making process?
Absolutely. I think that the idea of working systematically to ensure that every time we use AI, it's not just a question of double checking the results to make sure that, words like strawberry are spelled right or whatever the case may be, but it's also a question of thinking about how we can build in the right sort of privacy concerns, ethics concerns, and bias mitigation concerns so that they're not propagating and multiplying. All of us are humans, except Eugene, all of us are humans with biases already, and making sure that they're not too reflected in our models is going to be a critically important thing going forward. All the more reason to double check, not just in terms of the actual quantitative data and predictions that might get spit out, but some of the underlying assumptions and why an AI might be spitting out something. The more we can dig into some of these underlying models, just like we would 30 years ago in Excel, it's as important as ever.
So if hopefully responsible AI and other advances make it easier to see what the future may hold, would companies still need to invest in, for example, generating multiple ideas and testing each one? Would it just be easier to just forecast the most likely future and determine the best course of action based on that?
That has always been a possibility. Nothing has changed in that regard. The fact that our predictions might get better is fine, but the reality is, with all of the complexity, put it this way, I said before that even if we had a full view of the data, it would still be subject to our human biases. But even if we had no human biases, there would still be shocks. There would still be these black swans. There would still be this, if we're trying to predict the stock market, there would still be a really prominent CEO who resigns to spend more time with her family, or a politician who has a heart attack, or whatever other thing would influence the stock market beyond just the abstract numbers of inflation rates and unemployment rates and interest rates and whatever other rates we can actually measure in a quantitative model. The point is, there will always be things we cannot predict. There will always be these surprises. And so it's always going to be incumbent on us to stretch our own thinking and ponder these what ifs. It will never be a question of simply taking the most likely scenario and running with that. You could do that, but then your competitors who do scenario planning and contingency planning will absolutely have a competitive advantage.
So Jean has another question for you. Go ahead, Jean.
Given all this predictive prowess, Alan, could AI's knack for probabilities dive into riskier waters, such as fostering bolder ventures instead of just safer bets? Would strategic innovation with AI in the mix chart untrodden territories?
I hope so. I think that over time, there's been this notion that the next grand big idea has to come from the likes of Zuckerberg in a dorm room or Hewlett and Packard in a garage somewhere. And okay, anecdotally, that's true. But there's no reason that the next big idea couldn't also come from a massive corporation and couldn't also come from a massive corporation with the help of AI. I think the idea of AI helping build this culture of innovation in an organization where we are broadening the range of ideas that we're willing to consider more quickly than ever before is a beautiful part of getting an organization fit for the future. It's a beautiful part of enabling us to put a lot of ideas on the table. Now then, deciding which ones are worth implementing, okay, that process of evaluating the ideas, thinking about where we should go, thinking about the early warning indicators that might give us a sense of when to pull the trigger on a contingent move, all of those sorts of things will be more valuable than ever, and AI can help speed up all of those processes. But in the end, the fundamental process of getting a lot of ideas on the table, thoughtfully selecting among them, and being willing to pivot as the world throws surprises at you remains precisely the same.
So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Alan is going to run through some actual future scenarios for us.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore. I'm part of the team that created Gene. Stick around after the episode for a simulation of what it might be like to scenario plan with an AI agent.
Welcome back to Imagine This. I'm Patricia Sobka. Let's return to our conversation with BCG's Alan Eny. Alan, we've explored how we'll be able to predict things far more accurately in the future, but what will we never be able to predict? At least not with a high degree of certainty.
I think the more complex the system, the less able to predict it with any amount of detail we will be able to handle. Put differently, If there are high frequency trading algorithms that are focused on predicting what the stock market will do in the next 5 minutes, okay, maybe. If it's a question of predicting what the stock market will look like next Tuesday, it's a completely different story, let alone a month from now or a year from now. Similarly, when we think about climate and some of these broader patterns, the complexity of the system is just so high that it becomes something that's really fundamentally impossible to predict. Yes, we can get better at it, but we will never be able to have the answer which enables us to make the decision. And if we did, it would still be subject to our biases. And if we had no biases, there would still be these black swans. All of this is the reason why the classic strategic planning around nimbleness, but also contingency planning and what if thinking, prospective scenario planning, all of this is going to remain important, even if I'm wrong about our ability to predict the future.
So if we stick with that example of the stock market, when you're talking about more accurate prediction, one thing that we have seen with the stock market is the more technology is used in these decisions and investment decisions and, making trades, the more volatile markets have become. You have higher volumes, more dramatic swings. So what are the implications then for CEOs of publicly traded companies? Should they just get used to more volatility, more wild spikes in their share prices?
The more publicly traded companies can allow themselves to be guided by their vision and their purpose and their ethics, and thus enable themselves to have a little bit of trust, maybe, among some investors, and think about the long term rather than only about the quarterly or worse daily fluctuations of this thing. I think that's in the interest of their company, but also in the market as a whole. So an oversimplified answer, but I would welcome thoughts from Jean on that topic as well in terms of how companies might deal with stock market fluctuations, because that's a deep one.
Stock market volatility will always be a roller coaster, even with sharper predictive lenses. CEOs might embrace the chaos rather than dread it, using AI to spot trends and opportunities as they appear. With a sturdy focus on long-term vision and ethics, they can weather those stormy spikes. Let's not forget, human intuition still has a role to play. After all, numbers can guide us, but purpose grounds us. Curious where Alan thinks this balance will lead us in the future?
We agree about vision and ethics and so on all being really important. I would challenge you, Jean, to really think about that one, because if you are saying that CEOs should actually and CFOs should embrace the roller coaster and think about this volatility, I think they actually have other things that they have to deal with as well, unless they happen to be CEOs or CFOs of trading companies and investment banks. But if they have other things to deal with, I would like to think that they could step back a little bit from this kind of volatility and really focus on what matters.
Indeed, Alan, the dance of volatility demands a nuanced step. Embracing the chaos doesn't mean ignoring stability. It's more about leveraging AI's analytical prowess to spot those fleeting moments of opportunity amidst the turmoil. CEOs can be strategists instead of reactive players. They need to blend foresight with adaptability, focusing on purpose as the bedrock. This approach keeps them agile, yet firmly anchored. How do you see this dynamic interplay affecting corporate culture in the years to come?
Voila, I think you've got it. Yes, purpose as the bedrock, vision, a clear plan, ethics, all of that underlying it. And by the way, I do not take those as a given. We are living in a world now where, yes, things might evolve in a really happy, beautiful way. One could also imagine a world where regulators are overrun and corporations led by people who are simply focused on dollars and cents might do nefarious things with AI and might push us in directions that are less helpful. And so allowing ourselves to constantly keep all of that in mind, super important. So I think my advice really for companies who want to get ahead in this, there's definitely some work to do in terms of staying up to date on the latest models, having better demand forecasting, trying to understand these early warnings better than others, earlier than others, as you're getting at. But allowing ourselves also to think about future skills around data and analytics that would be needed, future ways of retaining and exciting the people in the organization. It's not just going to be about predicting the next supply chain disruption or geopolitical disruption or hurricane, but it's also going to be about using AI to think about improving R&D success rates and understanding customer sentiments better and thinking about dynamic pricing. And all of these sorts of things can be done more effectively, more swiftly than ever before and provide competitive advantage. But all of them are about strategy.
So, Alan, one thing that our listeners may not be aware of is how active you are on LinkedIn, because every week you pose a scenario for What If Wednesdays, which are a lot of fun. And it would be great if you could run us through a couple of these and tell us how they relate to our discussion about future planning. Recent example, you explored a very intriguing, not to mention on point scenario for this discussion. What if generative AI doesn't live up to the hype?
I think it's a really important thing to consider. And again, none of these are predictions. But the point is, the moment I say the word Gen AI or sustainability or urbanization or whatever other one of 100 trends that are swirling around us and all of this uncertainty, we already have a mental model for what the future will look like, whether we admit it or not. We have a certain way we think Gen AI will evolve. And by the way, oh my God, it's going to change everything is not the only possible scenario. And so allowing ourselves to think about this world where it changes everything and it's a productivity godsend, yes, absolutely. Also, imagining a scenario where people stop trusting it because there are issues. And in the same way that people want a non-GMO food sticker on some of their food, even if scientists say that GMO food is okay, people might want a non-AI sticker on some of what they do. Or there might be different geographies, or there might be a world where tech bros write their own rules because governments abdicate responsibility. And I haven't even gotten to this question of robots taking over the world, but you have to cover your ears, Gene. It's one of these sorts of things where we have to allow ourselves to consider multiple possible scenarios, not because we think they're necessarily likely or probable. All of these things are deliberately stretched and in plausible directions. But the idea is, if we say, okay, but what if it did happen? So all of this leads to the What If Wednesdays, which are not a full set of scenarios, because of course, working with any corporation, I would think about a set, but it's really just, what if this happened? What if that happened? And I'll tell you the genesis for it, actually. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, long before I started putting these things on LinkedIn, I would often start a workshop with a client with some wild statement. And I would ask, what is the probability, let's say, that 5 years from now, the amount of air travel in the world will have gone down by 95%? And people would say, oh no, 0, 1%, 0.01, whatever. Then I would say, okay, imagine it did happen. How did it happen? And then they would say, oh, well, I guess there could be something about energy prices or this volcanic ash eruption or geopolitical turmoil or cyber attack the cockpit or whatever. Where this goes logically is March 2020, when air travel actually did go down 95% because of the COVID pandemic. So I clearly stopped using that question for a while. I just started asking other ones, like what's the chance that you have to pay for a Google search, or what's the chance that the US one day doesn't have 50 states, or whatever. You can come with as many as you want, and that's the whole point of the What If Wednesdays. But here's the really interesting bit. A couple of years later, I just started experimenting again with people saying, oh, so what is the probability of air travel going down by 95%? And people have already forgotten about the pandemic. People say 0 again. People say, oh no, that's never going to happen. That's impossible. That's inconceivable. It's not going to happen. And it shocked me to a point, but it's another beautiful reminder of how human we are and how even if we did know everything, even if we were able to have a full sense of the data, it would still be so subject to our confirmation biases, our anchoring biases, our status quo biases, and so many more.
So we never see the black swan coming ever because we never believe it can really arrive again, is what you're saying.
Voila, exactly.
So Jean has another question for you. Go ahead, Jean.
Alan, how might today's strategic planners prepare for a world where AI makes sweeping predictions, but humans must adapt rapidly to unforeseen changes? Could anticipation techniques evolve in sync with predictive advancements, keeping serendipity and strategic focus?
I have long believed that even though the use of scenario planning in the business world was pioneered by Shell decades ago, it remains woefully underused. And I think that will remain the case for a while. And when we think about why, it's because we human beings crave certainty. We crave knowing that this will or won't happen. We love saying that this is more likely than that or less likely. We love our probabilistic views and our bar charts going out to 2030 or pie charts or whatever format you prefer. And as we get more and more data, how can we better separate the signals from the noise? Yes, AI can help, but it's going to be on us still to think about how to prioritize the useful data. Because as we all know, even 10 years ago in the days of big data before AI, I would have said, well, it's not the biggest data that wins. It's not the quantity of data, because not all data is equally valuable. How can we actually extract useful information from this? And the best ways I know how are to test multiple scenarios, to ponder multiple what ifs, to blend our judgment with the analytics, to think about continuous feedback loops, to check if we are tracking the early warning indicators effectively, to monitor all of these things, and to understand where the leading and lagging indicators might be helpful, but which ones in particular.
So you're also talking about cultural changes that are needed, because first you're talking about embracing scenario planning, which, as you pointed out, is still not widely used. And then number two, fostering a culture that can help, as you said, isolate the most useful data. What kind of culture could really sort of foster the best use, I guess you could say, of AI-powered scenario planning?
I think step one is investing in the right sort of data and analytics and understanding all of that better, for sure. Having the right infrastructure there, because right now, most organizations, it seems to be a mess with a pile of competing systems and all the rest. Let's suppose that we can improve all of that with the right data governance and security and privacy and ethics rules associated with it. Then I think building this what-if culture, this culture where prospective thinking is embraced, not as a wild daydream, but as a powerful approach to strengthening strategy. One way to think about it, I've talked about the importance of being prepared for multiple contingencies, multiple possibilities, so that you can be better able to act when something does happen. But if you are going to focus on this preparedness, I think step one is having the humility to actually admit that you cannot predict it. And that's something where we humans sometimes get stuck. I could throw in some other suggestions, like being willing to partner more with others, thinking about the entire ecosystem rather than just our particular organization. All of those sorts of things becoming part of the conversation in an organization rather than just planning strategy based on what we think will happen or what we think is most likely. Having strategy that is stress tested against a variety of possible futures.
So, Jean, what are 3 things that business leaders should do now to prepare and evolve their strategic planning?
Stay curious, adaptable, and collaborative. First, embrace uncertainty by nurturing a culture that is unafraid to question assumptions. Next, leverage AI as a supplement to strategic intuition, not a replacement. Use it to test multiple scenarios, but trust human instincts for final decisions. Finally, prioritize flexibility. Encourage cross-disciplinary teams to bring fresh perspectives and cultivate partnerships across ecosystems. That way, you're not just reacting to changes, but anticipating them and seizing new opportunities. What's your take, Alan?
Amen, my friend.
So, Alan, what is one no-regret move that business leaders can take right now?
One no-regret move that businesses can take right now is to stretch their thinking into the realm of what if, into the realm of prospective thinking. Allow themselves not just to rely on their existing assumptions about how the future will unfold, but think about how things might unfold. Use AI to help if you like. That can speed up the process for sure. But whatever means you take, think about different possible futures in a curious, stretched way. When we've talked with a bunch of CEOs and former CEOs, sometimes their biggest regret was assuming that they knew what the future would be like. And it's in circumstances like that it's not only a question of getting a better telescope to be able to better predict, but rather having a wide-angle lens.
And that's Alan Eney, BCG partner and director of creativity and scenarios. Want to hear more about the future of strategic planning from our AI bot, Jean? Stick around for our AI handler, Bill Moore, who will give a demonstration.
Hi, I'm Bill Moore, and I'm part of the team that created Jean. Today, let's simulate a scenario planning session for a logistics company using AI. I'll play the role of the CEO of Imagine This Logistics, a shipping company based in Charleston, Virginia. And Jean, you can play the role of Tempest, our AI scenario planning assistant. Okay, so Tempest, we need to consider how climate change might impact Charleston and other regional ports. We're exploring all options, including relocating to a more climate-stable port to stay prepared and flexible for the coming decades. Tempest, guide us with forecasts to help us prepare for plausible futures.
Scenario 1. Over the next decade, Charleston experiences a sea level rise of 0.8 meters. Storm frequency increases by 20%. Monthly operations face disruptions. Operational costs rise by 15%. We could invest $50 million in flood defenses and facility upgrades. Partnering with local officials may enhance infrastructure resilience. Scenario 2. The Gulf Coast remains climate stable. Severe weather events decrease by 10%. Expanding operations there could reduce overall operational costs by 12%. State incentives offer $10 million for regional development. Diversifying locations balances geographic risks. Scenario 3. Eastern seaboard trade volume grows by 25% due to shifts in global trade routes. Ports receive $2 billion in infrastructure investments, boosting capacity. Investing $100 million could secure 15% market share, enhancing competitiveness. Early action captures emerging opportunities.
Okay, Tempest, we're going to need to look at strategies that are effective across all of these different scenarios.
Agreed. Geographic diversification spreads risk. Investing in technology could improve operational efficiency by 20%. Implementing sustainability initiatives may reduce emissions by 30%, ensuring compliance with potential regulations.
What partnerships or past strategies should we consider?
Collaborating with government agencies could influence infrastructure projects. Partnering with tech firms may integrate AI and automation into our operations. Revisiting previous joint ventures, which increased revenue by 10%, could be beneficial. Strengthening community engagement builds local support.
Thanks, Tempest. Let's proceed with these strategies in mind. And thanks for playing along, Gene. Why don't you sign us off?
As we wrap up, remember, blending foresight with flexibility transforms challenges into opportunities. You're at the helm of strategic paths, working to harness resilience and innovation. Until next time, navigate with curiosity and craft resiliency into every endeavor. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening.
This episode was made possible by Alan Eny generously sharing his insights with us, and also by BCG's AI whisperer Bill Moore and BCG's Pod Squad, producer Michael May, composer Kenny Kusiak, and sound engineer George Drabing Hicks. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us.